Straight cash, homie.
Would you please break a damn story?
He took it out.
Oh, for you.
PFT OT Tuesday edition, all by myself. We had Big Cat today. He always runs out of the studio in New York City as soon as the show's over. Sims is on assignment. Peter King is going to be joining us on Friday. A few things I'd like to get to that we weren't able to address today. We talked a lot about the Monday night game. We talked a lot about the trade deadline. Plenty of other topics, though, still hovering over the NFL. And one, the availability this weekend or next weekend or the weekend after that of Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. He did not play on Sunday night when the Chiefs lost to the Packers. Chiefs are now 5-3 on the year and 0-1 without Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes had told Michelle Tafoya of NBC before the game that if it was a playoff game, he would have played. Andy Reid, the coach of the Chiefs, chimed in on this, and he says that basically it's going to come down to what the doctors say. Reid said that Mahomes during the Denver game was trying to get back in after he had the dislocated kneecap. So Mahomes wants to play, and the Chiefs like that about him, but ultimately it's what the doctors think. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind, at the risk of being ultra cynical, but we know how this works. The doctors are paid by the team. They are hired by the team. And if the doctors want to continue to be hired by the team and work for the team, and it is a very lucrative assignment in the market where the doctors are, because if you are providing medical care to the local NFL team, the average person is going to assume that that must be a good doctor. So you use that to leverage a bigger practice, you make more money, and that's what capitalism's all about. So a key to that is retaining the relationship with the local NFL team, and one key to retaining the relationship is sometimes you got to tell them what they want to hear. So it's not laboratory settings. It's not determined in a vacuum. And sometimes the doctors, and I'm not saying this is what's going on here, we just have to recognize the bias. Sometimes the doctors are listening for those clues regarding what they think the patient or the person footing the bill wants to hear. And in a case like this, when the patient wants to play, you almost have to be careful you don't push back too hard if you're the doctors, because the team may ultimately say, well, if the guy can play, then just let him play. We're willing to take some risk if he's willing to take some risk. But that's ultimately the decision the Chiefs have to make. If they do want to nudge the doctors or not nudge the doctors, if they just want to be ultra safe, maybe what they do in a case like this is they nudge the doctors towards saying he can't play. So then Patrick Mahomes won't get mad at the team, won't get mad at the coach for not letting him play. So, the pressure can go both ways. And in the old days, the pressure was always along the lines of pushing the player and the team to get the guy on the field because that's what the coach wanted. Now, in a case like this, who knows? Maybe the Chiefs are trying to tap the brakes a little bit on getting Mahomes back on the field because they understand the risk that they would be taking by putting their most important player on the field prematurely and potentially getting him injured. One way to protect the most important player on the field is to have great blocking. And in New England, Dante Scarnecchia, the well-respected offensive line coach, is willing to come out and say that the offensive line isn't good enough. Look, the offense has struggled this year, and we have focused on the revolving door at receiver. But Scarnecchia recently said via the Boston Herald, people have a right to criticize. We are not doing things very well. We're not running the ball very effectively, and it always starts up front. If that's where the blame is going to go, put a target on my chest first. That's how I feel about it. I'm responsible for those guys. Let's start there. And, when you consider that Big Cat and I spent a large chunk of 2 hours this morning talking about how Matt Nagy is handling difficulty and adversity in Chicago, how Freddie Kitchens is handling, how Brian Flores dealt with the ill-advised decision to call a blitz on 3rd and 20 with 17 seconds left in the first half that set up the first touchdown of the night for the Steelers. It's kind of refreshing to have a coach who says bluntly and candidly what's going on. And I'll take the blame. Put it on me. Now, it helps when you have a fistful of Super Bowl rings and when you've reached an age where you can walk away from the sport today and it really wouldn't change your life. But there's something to be learned in what Scarnecchia has said from some of these coaches who are early in their careers and they're not quite sure how to conduct themselves. Take it head on. You got a right to criticize. Look, we have to put a better product on the field, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're not trying to lose, we're trying to win. And sometimes in our effort to win, we're going to make some bad decisions. We're going to leave some things to be desired. but rest assured that we're doing everything we can to win as many games as possible. And look, ultimately, it's kind of hard to criticize the Patriots for anything. They're 8-0, and they're on their way, by all appearances, to another Super Bowl berth. And for Tom Brady, it's Super Bowl number 7 that he could be winning if the Patriots make it again to the championship game, and everyone thinks that they will at this point. At a minimum, to the AFC championship game. They've been there every season since 2011. And there's been some talk over the past week. A lot of it was sparked by Adam Schefter last Monday night on ESPN, and I don't know if they were just trying to fill up the time, whether or not Schefter was throwing a bone to Tom Brady's agent, Don Yee, to create some advanced buzz, to maybe get other teams to offer Tom Brady a little bit preemptively and prematurely numbers that could drive the price that the Patriots have to pay up to keep Tom Brady around for 2020. But either way, the word is out there that maybe Tom Brady leaves the Patriots after this year. Maybe he retires after this year. Maybe he wins number 7 and walks off into the sunset. That's something that Sims believes. Brady, in his weekly visit to Westwood One's Monday Night Football coverage with Jim Gray, he made it clear he still intends to play until he's 45. That's 3 more seasons beyond this one. So despite any buzz, despite any rumors, despite anything else, Brady's got 3 years left in him. That's what he's been saying consistently. And if you're Tom Brady, do you really want to start fresh somewhere else? That was the point I made last week. Where else do you go that you have everything set up to be successful as you've been? Because he's going to want to win a Super Bowl, or at least compete for a Super Bowl. And if the Patriots give him the best chance, that's where he's going to want to be. And he seems to be getting irritated by all this talk. And look, at a certain point, it does get old. It's like, how many different ways do I have to say it? Now we'll just see whether or not he does play for 3 more years. I always thought he pegged his retirement at 45 so he would never have a farewell year, and we'd never know which year is his last year, because I think there's a concern maybe he'd be too emotional in that farewell year, and he doesn't want it to be all about him. It's about the team. Because let's face it, if he does play until he's 45, he will have a farewell year. We'll know which year is his last year, unless going into his farewell year, he says, I'm not closing the door on playing next year, just to throw everyone off the scent so we don't treat his last year as his last year. Bottom line, to those who think this is his last year, either in football at all or in New England, I have a feeling it's not. And I have a feeling he'll be back in 2020 with the New England Patriots. And if and when Tom Brady is back with the New England Patriots in 2020, will he have Odell Beckham Jr. as one of his receivers? The two met after the game in Foxborough on Sunday. Apparently, Odell Beckham Jr. had a custom-made pair of cleats, goat cleats, for Tom Brady with goat hair, right? So there's a relationship there between those guys that has existed for a few years. Odell Beckham Jr. talked about it last week. They've talked about playing together. And I think Odell Beckham Jr. hoped when he came to Cleveland that the Browns were on track to becoming something like the Patriots. And 7 games in, it's not looking that way. And the balance of the season, I think, is going to go a long way toward allowing Odell Beckham Jr. to determine whether or not he wants to stay with the Browns after this season. And you know what? From the Browns' perspective, they may be thinking already that this guy isn't what we thought he was going to be, and maybe it is a little disruptive for him to be clamoring for the football, and maybe that's affecting the growth and development of quarterback Baker Mayfield, because he's got to factor in that stress, that demand, that expectation that Odell Beckham's going to get the ball. So, look, I don't know what's going to happen, and I guess there's a chance he would get traded before 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. But I think the next 9 games are going to go a long way toward determining whether or not Odell Beckham Jr. stay in Cleveland, lasts more than 1 season. And I think there's a bigger chance than we realize, based upon the way things have gone so far, that after 1 year, it could be that the Browns just try to flip him to someone else and admit mistake, admit that it was a bad idea, and move on. And it becomes easier to do that if the player begins to clamor to get out of Cleveland and ideally get to the place where it feels like he's wanted to go for years, and that is New England, and play with Tom Brady and the New England Patriots before Brady turns 45 and ultimately walks away from football. I'm going to walk away from PFTOT because I got nothing else to talk about. We've covered everything we needed to so far this morning. There will be a PFT PM podcast coming up later in the day. MDS will join me for the Week 8 awards. We'll answer some of your questions. Plus, what we're going to be doing, because we're going to tape it at 3 p.m. Eastern in that last hour of the trade window, we'll be reacting in real time to any trades that do happen between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock Eastern. And if any trades happen before then, we'll give you our thoughts on the deals that are done between now and the time that PFT PM starts. PFTOT is done. We'll see you later on today for PFT PM, and check us out all day long for updates on all trade rumors and actual deals that are done or aren't done at ProFootballTalk.com.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.